don't want you to feel bad about this, says Gary. Well, that's how week 5 starts, you guys. It's a 10-second clip. Could it be a more dramatic foreshadow than last week? He's talking to Leslie, who's crying on his shoulder, and he's comforting her, kind of like he's her dad. What do you think it means? Oh boy, coming soon, about 10 minutes. But back at the mansion, 4 of our women are doing what seems to be a synchronized swimming in the pool. It's either that or like an upbeat seance. The one not participating is Sandra, and my guess is she's still at risk of the runs. It's just a bad combo while in a swimsuit and in the water. Also, remember when I said there were 5 left? Well, there are 6. I think Sandra must have skipped the rose ceremony or something. She really milked that stomach ache. No pun intended. Pun almost always intended. And then Ellen behind the scenes reminds us that last week she told Gary she was falling in love with him. Is Ellen a little like Professor Trelawney? You know, without the eccentricity. Maybe it's just the glasses. But then Faith is saying that she has really strong feelings, but is also saying she's a little concerned that they haven't really had any real time together before hometowns next week. And Jesse has to come out and remind everyone of that, of hometowns. This won't be as funny in the coming seasons of Golden Bachelor, but I just love the juxtaposition of Young Bachelor and what we're seeing right now. It's all exactly the same. All the women are stressed out. They're taking deep breaths. The only difference is the age and the collagen, maybe the IQs. But to add to the suspense, they think that there are 4 hometown dates, which usually there are, but instead there are only 3. So again, they know how this show works. But yeah, 3 hometown dates. Is this because at Gary's age he can only handle 2 fantasy suites? Just wondering. Maybe they provide him with a little blue pill. It's inappropriate. But Jesse is also here to tell us that there is a magical, once-in-a-lifetime one-on-one date and a really exciting group date as well. And I'm thinking if this one-on-one is really that special, whoever gets it is probably who Gary is most fond of. I would bet that they told him this ahead of time and he's saving it for his top contender. So the date card is dropped and Leslie picks it up, probably because she had the one-on-one last week and knows it's not going to be her. And she reveals that the date is going to Faith. I know I alluded to her being the favorite last week, but I think this just seals the deal. I am predicting her to make it through to the end. Is she too young for him though? That's still on my mind. But again, I am a big fan of Faith. So she basically screams. She throws a pillow and then she's like, oh wait, oh yeah, what's the card say? And it says, you make my heart soar. I know these are just little cliches that hint at what the date is, but maybe this is really how Gary feels. And then all the rest of the women are very, on the surface, excited for her. But I'm pretty sure deep down, Teresa's insides are melting. Maybe she's a witch. It is Halloween, but I would guess that this is a very obvious threat to her relationship because, you know, she thinks so very highly of it. I'm just going to show you a quick picture of what I'm dealing with right now. So Gary is on his way to come pick her up in a little convertible Jeep looking thing. And I think he might remind me of a Muppet. These doppelgangers that I come up with are now being made in week 5. I'm not getting specific enough, but I'm starting to get the images in my mind. A little like a Muppet. Not in a goofy bad way, just like if one of the Muppets turned human, it would probably look like Gary. Maybe it's the hair. Anyway, Gary picks her up and behind the scenes, post-production interview, he says that this is going to be a test for Faith. It's going to be a test to see if her feelings have maxed out or if they can continue to blossom. I think that's bogus, but maybe it does mean that he just chose the absolute ultimate coolest date ever so that she would have no choice but to fall in love with him. A love spell, if you will. But they're driving to their date and it's windy again. Someone has to realize this is not good for women's hair. So what once were very lovely curls in Faith's hair are now like slightly bent straight hairs. But it probably would have gotten messed up anyway because there might be a lot of wind from the helicopter they're about to get in. Oh boy. We have a lot of helicopters on Bachelor. But we also find out Faith is afraid of heights. So maybe the producers actually did try to just save this one for Faith. I don't think so though. I stand by what I said before, but this really just did work out to be a producer's dream. They ask you your biggest fear before you're cast. It's all very strategic. But they get in, get soaring, and have the coolest views. California's pretty, but it's very expensive. They happen to also fly above the mansion where all the synchronized swimmers can see them above and they wave. Sandra still has not joined the party. She might need a Pepto. Susan yells out, I hate you, all in good fun, but Leslie's on the side of the pool harboring True hate. You should have seen the snare. Maybe you did. And then she says exactly what I was thinking about this date, about this once in a lifetime date. He saved it for Faith. Leslie knows. Watch us all be wrong, and he picks Teresa or something. But nonetheless, she is just not taking it well. Faith is having a great time though. She says she and Gary are literally on cloud nine. So I guess there is a cloud nine somewhere, and I hope to find it because apparently it's the best place you could be. But they exit cloud nine to land their helicopter on top of a yacht. And the way that they step out onto the boat is two drunk college kids. Their laughter is slow and loud, and they're stumbling into each other. And I imagine that they're not drunk, so I think this is just another indication that they are meant to be together. Then they go and drink. They're drinking some champagne, and they are, as Hermione would say, snogging. Sorry, that was 2 Harry Potter references. I promise no more. But they're macking hard for a couple of old folk. And back at the mansion, Leslie is now crying. It has escalated. Here I thought Teresa would be the one that couldn't handle it, but I should have known because Leslie has had very thin skin ever since the talent show. Ellen's sitting here trying to be her therapist, but it doesn't seem to be working. Leslie is, I would say, pretty distraught, crying into her hands, distraught. And sadly, as we cut back to the date, Gary is looking pretty in love. So this is not going well for Leslie. They're feeding each other grapes. Gary is kissing her like he just can't help it. He's usually kind of even-keeled with everybody else. Almost professional in the way that he talks about everything that he loves about these women. But with Faith, I feel like he's a little more giddy. Obviously still very articulate, because that's who Gary is, but with a little bit of childlike wonder behind it. And as they're talking, we find out Faith kind of had a not so great childhood. No true mother and father, a lot of time alone as a teenager. And honestly, this can only be more fuel to the fire of burning love that Gary has for her. It just makes her that much more interesting because she's a quality woman. She came out of the trauma and obviously made something great of herself. Bottom line, the two are connecting. She talks about a lack of feeling safe in her previous relationships, and I think Gary's giving her the security that she needs. Gary pulls out the rose and he doesn't give it to her. No, I kid. He absolutely gives it to her. She got that rose. He even tells her she's as beautiful as the rose, but it had a little loose petal, so that was unfortunate. But they finish with a hot tub dip that is located on the yacht. This is rich people living. And then they're on their way to hometowns next. So would I classify this as a once-in-a-lifetime date? Yes and no. Once in a lifetime for Gary and Faith individually. Not the first time we've seen something like this on Bachelor, though. I have to admit, I was expecting more. So we're back to the mansion. Everyone's talking about their predictions for the group date. And Faith walks in. She's describing to them how cool the date was, and thank God Kathy's not here, right? Because according to Kathy, nobody's allowed to talk about this stuff. But like mature women, they grin and bear it as they listen. Leslie's not really jazzed, neither is Ellen. But do they turn it into a fight? No, because this is The Bachelor and they have accepted their roles as sister wives. So the group date is a carnival type thing at Santa Monica Pier, and Gary's looking for everyone to just let out their inner child, which he did yesterday on his date with Faith. There's no competition this time though, it's just fun, but they do play whack-a-mole, and probably the competition is who is going to be able to get on the Ferris wheel with Gary. But everyone does look to be having a good time. They're having cotton candy, playing bumper cars, they even ride that swinging ship thing, and Sandra is on it. Let's hope that she's recovered because you don't even have to have dairy for that thing to empty your bowels. It seems to me though that in most instances on this date, Leslie has found a way to be the one just right immediately next to Gary. The girls had to be mad about this. You know that it's happening, but maybe since it's only an hour episode, they can't fit that bit into the show. But after all this fun stuff comes everyone's one-on-one time. First is with Teresa, and she says it's time for her to put it all on the line because basically it's hometowns or bust. And her way of doing that is basically saying, please let me introduce you to my family. I can't live without you. That's slightly out of context, but a fun summary of what she said. But I'm thinking that it's probably likely in his mind that he's saying, and I can't live without Faith. The woman, not the word. Teresa even says she's falling in love with him, and Gary just says, oh, It was a pity sound effect, essentially, at least compared to the way he was acting with Faith. But he does take her on the Ferris wheel, and he does kiss her and says they have a lot in common. Then he talks to Sandra. She gets next to no airtime. Then he talks to Susan, who also gets next to no airtime. And then it's Leslie, who we know has been riding the struggle bus of emotions. Now, their conversation starts off good, talking about oddly placed bruises that they received from their last date. But then she breaks down a little bit. She's talking about her struggles and how some old feelings have bubbled up to the surface. Bubbled up. I'm loving these Halloween references. That one counts, right? Bubbled up, bubble, double, toiling, trouble. Thing. But the emotions are related to the fact that she has been cheated on multiple times. So yeah, this show is going to be a trigger for you, Leslie. Unfortunately, your boyfriend is going to cheat on you most days, and usually in your presence. He might decide to stop eventually, but he also might just break up with you. He's got the pick of the litter. And then this is it. This is the preview from the start of the show. She's in tears over it, and he's comforting her. You know, I really do feel bad for her, but this probably wasn't the show to go on. You've got like a 4% chance that you make it out of here with the guy. I'm just afraid she's going to end up going home and needing to recover from a really horrible breakup, which takes a long time. She tells him she's crazy about him. He says, thanks for that. And he goes on to say that he felt the need to make sure she was safe on their one-on-one. Not like, yeah, I'm crazy about you too. No, it was basically like, thank you for sharing that with me. And for the record, I love the month of October. The only curveball was that she hugs him and kind of whispers that she's falling in love with him. And he says, you're my girl. So, but I think it was because he didn't know what to say. There was like a little bit of pause and he was running out of time. Then there's an interview with Ellen, and Ellen's describing her fears. She has a lot of them. She's holding back tears. Didn't mean to rhyme. And you can tell she's like the type of person that doesn't like to look weak. She's probably someone who's always like, you know, it is what it is, but not this time around. This time around, it's affecting her. And then in his one-on-one with Ellen, he is again giving Leslie vibes. Ellen says she's falling in love with him. He says he had a great time with her in the hot air balloon. And come rose time, Gary seems to be in just his most conflicted state. So much so that he can't give out a rose. And what this tells me is that Faith is number one and everybody else is tied for second. 5 people tied for second, because otherwise if he had someone that he knew he wanted to keep through to next week, just one person, he could have given that rose, right? He doesn't know, like I mean, it could be a tie between 4 people, or I don't know. It had to be a gut punch for all of them, because for Faith it was no question. So we're at the rose ceremony already. There's no cocktail party, and there are 2 roses to hand out. 5 women left. Gary does a speech, says he couldn't sleep last night because he knows this responsibility. He's got everyone's heart in his hands, but he's not crying. This is a good, have we turned a new leaf? But he picks up the first rose and it goes to Leslie. I think this is probably the most expected one out of the 5 of them. Maybe because it was the most recent one-on-one date. I don't know. Sadly, I think Sandra and Susan are bottom 2, even though I've really grown to love Susan. And then Jesse comes out to say it is the final rose. What does Jesse do with all the in-between time? I know we saw Chris more often than this. I feel like he was just like constantly advising both the lead and the contestants. Remember when Colton was all concerned he was a virgin, and so he went and he told Chris? That's what Chris is there for. Jesse's like back in some back room watching football, puts it on pause when it gets to the last rose, comes on out, says his thing, goes back, and that's it. I'm sorry, I completely cut the suspense there. Let's get back to it. And now for the final rose. Here come Gary's tears. As soon as he picks it up, he's kind of like, I feel like he's like forcing it out of his eyes. But we know he's an emotional guy, so I don't think the force is necessary. But the tears had to come because Gary's about to say goodbye to everyone except Teresa. Teresa gets the final rose. And she accepts it, of course, and is kind of hyperventilating as she does that. Now, this is something we typically don't see on Young Bachelor. The young contestants seem to handle the pressure a little bit better than these older women. Except when they get into the limo, probably. Once they get into the limo, then all hell breaks loose. Plus, maybe it's just Teresa. But we say goodbye to Sandra, to Ellen, and to Susan. Ellen is the only one that gets walked out, though. The other 2, just a hug and a farewell. And as they're saying, there's nothing too dramatic here about their goodbye. Gary's composed. He's speaking highly of her. He thanks her, and she tearfully says goodbye and gets into the car. Ellen was shocked, though. I mean, she said she was shocked, but that's what happens when we get to this point in the season. From here on out, everyone will be shocked. Unless they really F it up somehow. They could really F it up. The previews are fun though. Hometown previews show that instead of a really intense conversation with the woman's brothers, Gary's having really intense conversations with the woman's grandkids. I think I was right about the toys. And it's not the parents crying that their child would get hurt. It's the children crying that their mother might get hurt. And our rose ceremony preview shows that he's crying because he's in love with 3 women. Kind of not a shocker in 2023. And then our end clip is all the women giving a group hug because this is their final night together. I did expect Susan to be the one to make this a funny scene, and she did. Told everyone to stay out of her boobs. I was hoping it was like she let out a fart or something. That didn't happen. Still good though. Everybody laughed. Sad to see her go. But that concludes week 5. That zoomed by. I'll see you guys next week for Hometowns. Happy Halloween.